I'm going to kick off the panel as well as the moderator. So welcome the panelists onto the stage. And Atria, maybe you can share more information on that.
Actually, really inspiring, really visionary, and also illustrative of all the amazing opportunities and technological and scientific unlocks that we can prospectively see in the future. So with that, I'd actually like to invite the next series of panelists that have actually come up. It is titled The Investor's Perspective, so discussion of TradSci, DeSci, and then also sort of emergent themes. So Brent Roberts, who from Split Capital, I'd like to welcome you to the stage. And then we have Brian Majanaski from Cerebrum DAO, and then also Chris Leiter from Atria Capital. And then also we have Jack Platts from Hypersphere. And thank you so much for your time and your insights here.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, all the panelists. Welcome on board. So why don't we just, I guess one by one, just introduce yourself a little bit, and also your focus of your efforts, no matter it's going to be investment or your own entrepreneur experience, and what's really generate your interest and excitement in DeSci.
Sure, so let me kick that off. My name is Brent. I'm CEO of Split Capital, which is a hedge fund focused on high conviction opportunities in the digital asset market. So it's mostly liquid tokens, no venture. My link to DeSci is I've been a multi-asset investor for more than a decade now. I've done quite a bit in the bio space, both into public biotech as well as a direct venture too. Nothing really medtech, more on the therapeutics side of things. Very much indication agnostic. And I like DeSci, or I see the potential in DeSci because it's a bit selfish. It falls within the two of my passions, the one being the biotech market and the other one being the crypto market. And I definitely see the potential of overlap there. So I'm excited about the category and the level of innovation that can come from it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Majewski. I'm the founder of Cerebrum DAO, and so I am fully red-pilled into DeSci as a founder of a bio DAO itself, and have been doing this for quite some time now. I'm also a personal investor in crypto assets, and have been a software entrepreneur for, 25 years or so. Before getting into this field of neuroscience and biotech. Yeah, Jane, your presentation was fantastic. The model that we're thinking through for Cerebrum DAO is exactly that. This community-powered engine that people can plug into with their tokens, and not only fund the advancement of neuroscience and toward the ending of brain diseases from our perspective, but getting utility out of that token where they can stream data and understand personally more about their brain health, and then have access to personalized solutions via the utility of the token. So we see a great future for this. I'm invested in the DeSci ecosystem in a number of different places as well.
Great. My name is Jack Platts. I'm the co-founder and CIO of Hypersphere Ventures. And we started the firm in 2020. We have a liquid fund and a venture fund, and have started to look really closely at DeSci. Prior to that, I was really on Polkadot and was at Polkadot for about 3 years. And I had 1 year at my brother's biotech firm, family office, early drug discovery. So getting into the overlap of crypto, what I've been working on, and early drug discovery is very interesting. And I think there's a lot of promise in the space, and as well as what Jane said, if you layer in AI drug discovery on top of that, I think we're just now starting to see the potential of that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Leiter. I'm the founder, general partner of Atria Ventures. We're a San Francisco-based early-stage venture fund investing at the intersection of AI and biology. I'm replacing my colleague, John Spies, who's up here. John, wave. So please come to see myself or John during the day if you're having any interesting projects or ideas that we'd like to talk to you about as you're thinking about building. Atria is a 0 to 1 firm, meaning that we really partner with entrepreneurs and founders across the life sciences ecosystem, building companies at that pre-seed stage. So we primarily invest anywhere from $250K to $1.5 million in early stage companies, both here in Europe and the US, globally. And we focus on this kind of enabling infrastructure across the life sciences. So we focus on kind of what I consider distribution, discovery, and data. So how do we kind of support discovery of new molecules, new assets, and enabling AI and infrastructure that powers that? How do we kind of invest in the data science layer across life sciences that ultimately support the moat around IP and new assets being developed? And then how do we think about distributing these new therapies and molecules and assets across the life science ecosystem, either from M&A, from biotech to pharma, or launching drugs and making sure they're coming to the patients that ultimately need them most? So that's our focus of the fund. In broader DeSci and decentralized science, I've been a long-time crypto investor, but also a long-time investor in molecule and the broader bio ecosystem. And I think, as we talked about earlier, and Jane, you mentioned this really quite succinctly on your presentation, is the ability to kind of involve patients earlier in the life cycle of drug discovery. And that's the opportunity that I think a lot of us are here today, is that mission and ultimately that impact and where it can lead to downstream.
Great. I think one of the things I really want to focus on is a challenge right now biotech and healthcare overall are facing today, especially maybe under Trump's administration. So what are the biggest challenges that, based on your experience, are biology, are biotech, are healthcare facing, and whether some of them can be helped or can be solved somehow by AI or Web3 in the short to mid-term? Of course, longer term, I think everything can be a super blue sky, but within, for example, next 3 to 5 years, what are the challenges you think AI and or blockchain can help solve? Maybe start with Chris?
Yeah, I mean, just to pick up on the theme around data here, at the end of the day, all the foundational models that we're seeing happen in biology. So we've invested in a few of the open source models. We've invested in, also a large amount of these models like Isomorphic Labs and Chai Discovery and Evo Scale 2. These are some companies that are kind of in the protein diffusion model space. These models are only as good as the data that they have to train on, right? I mean, it sounds obvious, and we know this is the kind of key issue across not just in biology, but other sectors. And a lot of this data is sitting inside these kind of large pharmaceutical companies that just don't have the incentives aligned to share or release that data. So, Jane, to your point, I think possibly one of the most foundational and potentially transformative effects that DeSci can have in biology is aligning incentives to share that data. Whether it's we talked about this with Roy Van and the panel before around repurposing drugs and the data around that. But how do you find and source new data from the EHR, from patients directly, to find new indications, but also the patient sets, the population from whether clinical trials or once you have the drug approved, to ultimately bring the drug to the right patients at the right time. So can Web3 potentially have this incentivization mechanism to get big pharma involved? And that's where I came from before starting Atria. And I think, the early signs is that, Pfizer Ventures obviously has invested in the space, but how do we encourage that trad side to come involved in that space? That's one of the biggest opportunities I see in terms of aligning incentives.
Yeah, just add to that, and to the data point is spot on, but also in addition to that, the model, the foundational model needs to be able to be application specific in doing things like discovering new drugs. So using a traditional LLM is not going to be quite as fast as having a lot of developers just focused on building one specifically for drug discovery, assuming that data is there and they have access to a broad base of papers. Then really plugging that in to be able to lower the likelihood that you're rejected in clinical trials. It seems like on the cost side of things for developing new drugs, 85% or so of it is really at the clinical trials side of things. So one way to improve or lower costs is to just improve the likelihood that you actually get past the clinical trials. Like you're actually setting up an experiment and you have a valid hypothesis that has a higher likelihood of being approved and turning into an actual drug. And so I think that's probably one area where AI can do a lot of the work up front, where maybe a human was piecing all this stuff together before, or a lot of humans, but having kind of a computational model that's 10x more efficient than like a traditional LM will probably unlock a lot of potential to actually have AI come up with a lot of new cures to diseases that otherwise maybe would take a lot longer to complete.
Totally.
You mentioned the Trump funding cuts as well. I assume that's another part of this. So the way we think about it is this is just a really amazing opportunity right now and a catalyst, I think, for both solving the funding problem, but then incentivizing the data collection problem in an application-specific way. So, on the neuroscience side, at least how we think about this with Cerebrum is, I mean, you got billions and billions of dollars that go through NIH to fund research that are likely being cut right now. And I know I'm talking with some labs, they're facing a crisis right now. But ultimately, that's the people's money, right? And it's been allocated by unelected bureaucrats, really. And so that's not very efficient. We can kind of take the power back into our own hands. So you as a person, if you want brain health funding to continue, you come to a place like Cerebrum DAO and you crowdfund, right? So it's your money again, but now you're getting a token that will have some utility for you. And so if this happens in mass, we can easily create hundreds of millions of dollars to billions of dollars of funding if people realize that they have the agency to go do this. And then likewise on this data side, then we create applications that plug them in an application-specific way. And so think about your own personalized brain fitness coach, right? If you're willing to plug in through an app and connect your wearables, we can train models that can give you a brain fitness score just like you get a daily sleep score from your ring. And then we can train a coach to educate you about your brain health, and then we can kind of point you to the research that's being funded that might matter to you personally. And so, like, this is all about empowering people and the incentives, and the tokens really allow you to do that if you design it right. And giving people an idea that they have agency with their money and their data and their behaviors on a daily basis to really advance science in an application-specific area like neuroscience.
Yeah.
So funding and liquidity, I guess that's a major new market of the DeSci for sure. But I guess I'd like to speak to it more from a Web3 side than an AI side, right? With an example, and again, I'm not here to shill, but something like Genomes, so Genomes DAO, where essentially you have your DNA, like data within your control. I think most of us in the room are extremely fatigued by big tech monetizing our data, and we've seen no return for that, and we've lost the privacy. Something like Genomes DAO, where it's your data, and it can still be commercialized, but at least you sort of see the return for that, and you have the control of it.
Yeah, totally. I think blockchain definitely serve as an extremely important, I would call it the infrastructure for the people to share, no matter it's health data or research data. Because we were actually talking to a few Stanford professors last month, and then a couple of them saying that OpenAI hired them and they wanted to develop their own AI for deep science. Because deep science database is just so different from the current version of LLM, which the data used to train the model is actually very largely available in public domain for current the GPT versions. But for deep science, people actually need very specific labeling, very specific benchmarkings. So they really need the brains to train the model. And then the professors' feeling were like OpenAI pay them per hour fixed rate, and then feels like the model absorbs their brain, and then never asks them for anything ever again. So I think here at Web3 space, actually blockchain can help design a super good ecosystem where the alignment can be much better. So the contributor, the data owners, and ultimately who is beneficiary from this like AI model, like everything can be much better aligned. So,
I just want to give a really quick real-world example of, actually, we all just kind of mentioned this. I'm also going to show my own portfolio for a second. So, we invested in a company called Axiom, a San Francisco-based large language model for toxicity studies. And, animal studies at preclinical, clinical is one of the most expensive parts of the drug discovery life cycle, as everyone knows. And Axiom's mission is to eliminate animal studies. Now, they're focusing, just to your point, around just liver toxicity, which also happens to be the largest set of usually tox expenses. And so they came out of stealth yesterday, Axiom BioSci, I think, axiom.bio, if you want to take a look. But that's like an example of where it's a very specific deep science model. It's a large language model just on that data set. And then they've had to go through partnering with several academic medical centers plus some biotechs to actually extract that data and then to train their own models on top of that, then to produce their own proprietary data in addition. So, and the next stage, the next phase of that startup will ultimately be partnering with pharma, partnering with biotechs to then drive their pipeline assets through the kind of traditional scientific discovery process. That also links into the FDA and some of the regulatory pressures that we're talking about. And so I don't want to get too far into it, but I don't know if everyone in the room knows that the FDA is essentially kind of relax some of the rules around animal studies on certain types of drug discovery processes. And that's like another really interesting regulatory tailwind, not just for the company I mentioned, but in general, DeSci, and the ability for DAOs and projects in DeSci to ultimately bring therapies and drugs and assets into the clinic.
Perfect. So I guess let's move on to more personal questions, maybe one by one. Chris, you up first. So I think you run both sides, right? The traditional life sciences side and then the DeSci part. So what excites you the most right now? What kind of opportunities do you feel like more fit into DeSci field? And then what are the opportunities you feel like, okay, I can only look at them in the traditional fields, and why?
Yeah, I'll try to, I think we're really still at the infancy of DeSci. The types of projects that I see having the most interest and the most applicability to our field right now is really this kind of Venn diagram where it kind of says on one side therapies and I would say kind of therapeutic areas and assets that are just like ignored by pharma. Mm-hmm. And then on this side you have like a super engaged consumer or patient advocacy group side. And so like if you think about like a couple years ago, and what was the best example? And we've heard about Roivant, we've heard about BridgeBio, but it also was Vertex Pharma. If anybody knows about the history behind Vertex, which is a $20 billion market cap pharmaceutical company, they developed an asset by the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation that essentially cured cystic fibrosis, and that foundation now is one of the wealthiest private foundations in the world because they ended up having the royalty license on the back end of that. I've always thought DeSci can operate in a very similar or mimic a lot of those types of traditional plays where you have an engaged patient group that is able to take the very earliest, riskiest part of drug development, which ultimately has to have this engaged patient population, and then bring it into an asset development phase that allows more capital allocators to come on board, whether that's pharma, whether it's biotech hedge funds, whether it's private equity, or partnering with other biotechs. We're not at that stage right now, right? I think we will be over the next 5 years, if not sooner. What I get really excited about right now is like these kind of engaged patient groups like Hair DAO, which some of you will meet, Long COVID DAO, that are really kind of ignored by traditional pharma for many, many years, and for a lot of different reasons we can debate why that is, and that's the kind of where I look at for the opportunities to invest in DeSci, which we do actively invest out of the fund.
Thank you so much. And then moving on to Jack. So Hypersphere actually is a very successful early stage investor in Web3 spaces. And then based on your experience on some extremely successful investment case in the past, what are the things you are looking for in a new DeSci projects? What excites you most there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I agree that DeSci is still relatively early, and there's been a lot of D plus, DeFi or refi for regenerative finance, and it's always quite tricky in the early stages of whether adding Web3 to something makes it better, because typically adding blockchains to anything makes it slower, more expensive, and poor UX. Over time, that'll change, of course. But so from that perspective, really, what can Web3 or crypto unlock for something as important and as real as all of our lives and our biology? So I think the initial DAOs that have been mentioned are a good way to do that. Simple capital formation to fund different types of research or different types of experiments that are otherwise not the focus or of traditional pharma. So I really think of what kind of unlocked understanding the early stages of DeSci, at least for me, coming from a non-biotech background, is just the capital formation piece. Crypto is very good at that, whether it be ICOs or deepen with decentralized physical infrastructure networks. There's clearly something there where we can fund more researchers or get more experiments off the ground, so then big pharma or biotech VCs can pick it up.
Thank you, Jack. I think one of the challenges here, as you said, because DeSci is still very early, right? I think one of the challenges there is how to balance by nature, it's patient, it's long-term, it slows R&D in reality versus extremely fast pace in the crypto side. How you see the challenge there, and how as an investor what are the things you are looking for in a new venture that you think that challenge can be sort of reduced or managed? Yeah, Jack,
to me?
To both of you actually, because one is investor and one is there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it's a great point. So the way we're thinking about it with Cerebrum is kind of like a barbell strategy, because it's this community engagement. And Chris, you're absolutely right. My original thesis on Cerebrum was, it's a venture philanthropy but tokenized, so you can drive utility directly to end users and participants. So, we have our therapeutic development, which is, funding really early stage research and translating it through. But we also have like a product strategy that we take and we say, well, what can we do that can drive value to an end user for their brain health today? And so we've got some digital interventions there that we're working on through, I mentioned the Brain Fitness Coach, the Brain Fitness AI, the Brain Fitness Score. We've got a natural product that's already on the market, that's already safe, and we're doing human studies on it. They're going to begin next month. And so, if you think about that, it's a natural product that should be neuroprotective based on all the lab data that we have, and it's patented. So if we can actually demonstrate it works in humans, you have a safe neuroprotective intervention that you can take throughout your life that is easily accessible to you because it's relatively affordable. And so these are things, and then we provide access to these solutions with the Neuron token. So there's utility to actually owning the token. There's something for you to do and engage in today. You can start contributing data to the DAO, and then you can watch as these longer-term therapeutics, come in and play. So we're trying to create excitement, we're trying to create engagement through the token today, but also still doing the long-term development and crowdfunding of that.
One more question for you, Brian. So what kind of difference do you see between DAO, the DAO fundraising approach versus the traditional VC fund? How would it be very different if you raise the funding for your current research you're doing via the traditional way versus what you are doing here in Web3 world?
Yeah, it's a great question because I probably have an order of magnitude or two more capital if I took the traditional route. The problem with that, though, was when I looked at it, I said I can get more capital faster, but I'm losing out on all the benefit of the token and the utility and the user engagement. And so I just played it out and said, well, if the world's going on digital, if the financial system of the world is going to be tokenized, which I believe, and it's all going to run on digital assets, why not set up the play now and then ride the wave, and we'll be the largest thing in brain health globally because we're on the best platform, even though the dollars are tight right now. So yeah, there's always this temptation to go to traditional capital. I've just resisted it to try to stay true to the token model because I do think the problem we're solving with advancing neuroscience and translating therapeutics, and I'm going to talk about this later, it's an incentive problem, and how we're solving the incentives is with the token. And so I bypass it if I go to traditional capital.
Got it. Thank you, Brian. So Brent, so you used to run like an allocator's row. You have the allocator row, and then on the other hand, you are also running a liquid strategy. And it's actually very different. It's like on the two sides of the spectrum. So what would you see, say, from the DeSci perspective? What are the signals that you are looking into when you feel like, okay, the capital I'm allocating to specific funds or specific project, DeSci projects, those are rising. But on the other hand, on the liquid strategy side, what are the signals you are looking at to buy or to sell for certain projects? What's your take there?
Sure. So let me repeat what the rest of the panelists have said. And so DeSci is very, very early right now. And let's just take a step back, right? As a hedge fund or an allocator, you are a steward of capital, which means you need to responsibly invest for financial return. That is like the crux of investing. Now, in terms of the DeSci or the biotech market in general, let's break it into a few parts, right? Let's go public biotech. It thrives on high liquidity and easy, monetary conditions, which we haven't had since about 2021. Will that start to change moving forward? I'm not too sure. But there's nearly a macro thing at play, I would say, on a global macro market space, but again, on the biotech macro within the biotech market itself, right? So, do I think it's the right time to sort of step in now and bid these projects, like these tokens? I'm not sure. So crypto does face a general liquidity problem. There's a fight for liquidity, and there's a fight for mindshare, and there's a fight for attention. There's something that needs to really, really catalyze this space before it can move materially higher. When we have a look at tokens, fundamentals do matter for sure, but in the crypto market, substantially less.
So what, in your view, are the best catalysts for DeSci, as far as you can think of?
So the catalysts themselves, I'm not too sure, but I feel like the space nearly needs to have its ChatGPT moment where it'll be sort of like a domino effect. Has that happened yet? No. What will catalyze it? I'm not too sure, but I'm waiting for that. And until then, just maintain relationships with the teams, and there's a few very, very high quality teams in this space.
Yeah, and actually that brings to a question I want to ask to all of you. That's the final last question to all of you. What are the interaction that you can see coming now and in the near future between the traditional science and DeSci? And what are the hottest or what are the most promising area you are looking at right now between those two sides? Maybe starting from Chris?
Yeah, I'm just going to pick up one. I'm going to go back to the last question Brent made there real quick before I answer that question. I think we're missing. Yeah, I don't see a lot of crypto investors really deeply understanding the scientific process, right? And I think that is why DeSci is very early. That's why there's a liquidity. Let's just face it. There's a liquidity issue around that, right? And we'll continue to do that until you galvanize this kind of hybrid strategy that we're certainly running at Atria, which is kind of deep scientific expertise, deep crypto expertise, and marrying the two. And I think that's what I'm really excited about over the next 1 to 2 years, seeing a lot of more traditional venture funds thinking about DeSci. But I think that's just because we're so early. So I just want to pick up on that. I don't think we actually have really smart investors yet in this space at scale. But that's an opportunity for a lot of people in this room who are considering coming in. To answer your question, I'm really excited about we're now this phase 1 of capital formation of DeSci, but what's the next stage? Well, we need to go into clinic, right? We need to be bringing and supporting these DAOs and therapies and assets to actually not just becoming traditional biotech companies, but actually continuing to the decentralized process. So what does that mean? Okay, so how do you run preclinical workflows and clinical trials decentralized? So one of the big things that I'm looking at is kind of RPA, robotic lab automation is a big focus. Biomanufacturing, how do you do that remote? The CDMO space is incredibly archaic, and Sonal from earlier mentioned she's looking into biomanufacturing. That's a big space we're looking at. How do you actually run that through incentives that are on chain? So lots of other areas, but those are like the top two, I would say.
Got it. Yep, Jack?
Yeah, I'd say the most obvious next step for beyond the capital formation is tying back either some sort of cash flows or acquisition of some of these assets or early experiments to token holders, because I think there's obviously tokens trade and they can go up and down in value, but in terms of actually tying them to the science and to the outcome of experiments over a longer time period, I think that's going to be a challenge and a communication problem for a lot of projects to explain to their community that science takes time, clinical trials take a lot of time, and crypto typically is a lot faster. So I think that's more people hopefully will be brought on the journey through those. Like we talked a lot about aligning incentives, but actually seeing that play out in terms of actual projects. And you're giving up your data. Okay, so how much are you going to get? Is it worth it for the service or money you're getting? And all of the next layer beyond some of the things that we all agree are high mission, high impact, and important for curing disease.
Yeah, I mean, communities are core, and our tokens are product. So, making the token useful and fun and engaging early, I think we have to do that to catalyze the movement and to drive token appreciation and be able to get more capital, to deploy more capital. Before we're going to see returns from our projects. As far as where we interface with DeSci and when will that happen, our thesis with Cerebrum is more shots on goal and more diversity of hypotheses, and scarcity is the mother of all invention in some regards. So we don't have much capital, so we got to prove we can do it better, faster, cheaper, and push these assets through the pipeline and make them interesting for DeSci to pick up.
Every company CEO thinks that their stock is undervalued. And I think in the crypto market, the problem is even larger. Every founder thinks their token is egregiously undervalued, right? But if you think about a liquid market, it all functions on supply-demand. So there's two things here. In the traditional markets, you don't see retail, mom and pop, so bidding like therapeutic biotech stocks because they don't understand it, right? So I think building in the DeSci space, focus on something simple and focus on something that the layman or the mom and pop can truly understand and really grasp. That's on the retail side. I think on the institutional side, again, institutional participation in the crypto markets is relatively thin. What changes that? I think it's just time. I think it's market maturity. And I think it's just growth of the overall market itself.
Yeah, totally echo that. I think maybe a little bit summary here. I think two things maybe from DeSci part we can help, no matter it's going to be better educate the crypto audience or trying to increase the awareness or participation from the audience side. I think two things. One is, as Brent just said, I think one is trying to find something that maybe just an average crypto audience feel closer to, like more tangible. And they feel like it's very close to him, not like super distant R&D processes that has nothing to do with me. I think that's one. And two is, I think you need to educate and communicate very well with your audience, with your community. And then I think another part is the feedback loop. I think the thing is R&D, in reality, the feedback loop is too long, too slow. And then I think if by nature, the project we're working on right now, it's that nature, but I think you need to share maybe in a higher frequency in like more deeper details with your community, what you are doing and what are you progressing. And then maybe on another side, on new projects, I think what we're looking for is maybe something that has a shorter the feedback loop. People can feel something like more like faster and like more efficiently, so they know like it's just growing. It's like AI. Maybe you feel like you're contributing to GPT-1, and then after a while, you feel like, okay, the model I'm contributing to, in addition to the token paid to me, I also feel the progress of GPT-1 to GPT-2. I feel the progress there. So I think the feedback loop there, they feel something is progressing. That's important for the audience too. So I think that concludes our panel talk. Thank you so much all for joining us, and thank you for all the panelists to sharing your expertise. Thank you.